Albert Einstein says the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. Winston Churchill, one of my favorites, says, "I'm always ready to learn, although I do not like always being taught." Are you like that? Do you like to learn, but you don't necessarily like to be taught all the time? Change is an interesting thing. And we're going to talk a lot about change today as we kind of set up this week, because in my experience, in my career here in 30 some years in this business, I've never seen the pace of change as rapid as it is today. And it requires a lot from us as leaders and trusted advisors, and how we tackle that issue and how we help our customers with that issue. And what I think is unique about this group is this isn't the first time. This isn't the first time that you've had to help your customers manage change. Am I right? And in fact, over decades, we've become really good at this as partners. We really have. And now, of course, marks another moment in time where we have to reinvent ourselves yet again. And we've become really good at reinventing ourselves. Why is that so important? Our landscape is constantly changing. Just a couple of quick things up here. Look at this. McKinsey says that advances in AI, machine learning, robotics, other technologies have increased the pace of change tenfold. Look at this. UI, it took 12 years from the release of the first mobile phone to reach 50 million users. It took Facebook 4 years to reach that same number. WeChat only 1 year, and Pokemon Go just 19 days. ChatGPT hit 100 million active users 2 months after launch. 2 months after launch. Guys, we've just never seen anything like this before. We've never seen anything like this before. And there are tremendous implications to this. You're going to hear a lot of thought leadership this week about this topic and where it's going next, and the imperative it puts on us as partners and suppliers and agents of change, right? And how we need to tackle this. But people respond to change differently, right? We all do, our customers do. We respond to change differently. The first is, of course, some will put their head in the sand. They'll simply say, I know nothing, and it's not happening, and right? They just put their head in the sand and they deny that change is happening. There's another one, which is they keep doing the same thing, hoping for a different outcome. And guys, you could think about it right now. Over the past, decade, even shorter amount of years, the world is littered with brands, household brands, all over the world that are on a pile of ineffective and irrelevant brands now today, because they're in that category. They didn't change quickly enough. They didn't adapt quickly enough. They ignored it. Right? And they just said, well, if we just keep doing what we're doing, we'll be okay. And there are brands that we all know that have suffered the demise of that outcome. And then there's another category where we talk about change, but we postpone any decision of consequence. You guys have customers that you'd put in that category today? Right? We talk a lot about it. Oh yeah, this is important. We're going to look at it. We're going to evaluate. We're going to play with it. We're going to do different things around this and think about it. But they avoid any significant decision of consequence. And then lastly, there's a category of people that are willing to reimagine the enterprise as a result of this, that look out beyond the headlights of the car and recognize that this change is either here or coming, and I have to get ready. I have to get ready to respond to that, to change myself and how I approach things, to figure out how I'm going to leverage that technology and those solutions to drive different outcomes for my business before my competition does. Those are the forward thinkers that we all need to figure out how to be, and we all need to figure out how to influence in our customer relationships. So I think it's really important when you think about change that you have a point of view. You have a point of view about what change means and what what your role is in a world that is changing all the time. What's my point of view on it? First of all, it's an obvious one, change is inevitable. We know that. If you've been in this industry for any longer than 3 months, you know change just happens all the time. And one of our biggest struggles as people in this channel, for example, is just staying on top of that, right? Is figuring out what's next, what's new, what do I have to get smarter about today? Change is inevitable. Change also elicits a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Am I right about that? And so we have customers that get worried about what this might mean for our business. Perhaps also they may get worried about making the wrong decision. Indecision is actually one of our biggest obstacles in this business today. Indecision. And so oftentimes there's this fear and uncertainty and doubt out there because of change, where customers tend to pump the brakes, press pause, want to think about it more, want to wait and see what kind of reveals itself over time. We know that change will elicit a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But the other thing that I know about this, guys, is that change must be evolutionary before it becomes revolutionary. It has to. Effective change actually doesn't happen in one giant leap. It never does. It happens in small, logical steps, incremental changes as we evolve into what ultimately becomes, in retrospect, a very revolutionary place. Does that make sense? But change has to be evolutionary before it's revolutionary. I want you to change the way for a moment how you think about change. And I have this chart up here because I want to give us some context about kind of how we view this world, right? The chart on the left, the axis on the left is around impact, from low impact to high impact on an enterprise. On the bottom, it's low effort to high effort, right? So what are the things that I can do today that might be really low effort in implementing in my business, but have very little impact on the business, like impactful change on the business, right? What is that? What fits in low effort, low impact, and what fits in this high effort, revolutionary, kind of high impact quadrant? And if you think about our legacy as partners in this channel for the last 20 plus years, right? There are some categories of solutions that I would say today kind of fit in this category down on the bottom left. Who here would agree with this? DIA, you want faster internet access, okay? That's pretty low effort today. Would you agree? Pretty low effort. We kind of do that in our sleep, right? We know that really, really well. I would also say that it's not anymore hugely impactful on the business. It's not like we're taking people from dial-up to 10 meg, right? It's not like that. These are incremental things. So it's not huge impact. Colo and data center, not huge impact. SD-WAN gets a bit more complicated, right? It may be relatively low on impact, but it gets a little bit more complex in how we manage. I would argue that UCaaS over the years has become so much more simpler and cookie cutter that it's actually way down the effort, down the scale around effort, and its impact on the business has actually become less important than what it was even 4, 5, 6 years ago. Security, still really important. And actually, probably if there's anything on that chart that's increasing in impact, it might be that, because it's so critically important to the enterprise. Let me pause there for a second. Anybody disagree with this or have thoughts on that? What do you think? Does that resonate? Yeah? Yeah. Yes. It is time dependent. You're right, Arvin. And so I would argue today, in this moment, right, that's where I would chart those things. But it is time dependent. You're absolutely right. So when we think then about CX and customer experience, in the traditional channel, if we look at customer experience, before you started working around this table and in this community here, when we talked about CX, what was the first thing you thought of? Call center. Right? Call center, contact center. It's okay, CX, that means contact center, right? That means contact center. Here's the irony of it, guys. Contact center, even today, is actually really, really high on effort. Think about that for a second. ripping and replacing somebody's contact center platform, whether it be from prem to cloud or from cloud to cloud, either way, it's a big lift. Do you agree? Do you agree? High complexity, high complexity. But I'd also say, and our friends at Nice CX1 last night even admitted this, right? Where he said, routing and ACD, we do that just like everyone else, right? Core routing and ACD, what we affectionately call the plumbing, that guys is not actually hugely impactful on the business. Not really, not anymore, right? That's just the table stakes for what you need in a contact center. But it's ironic that in our channel, the gravitation is, oh, if I'm supposed to pivot to selling CX, I got to go find customers that are ready to replace their contact center platform. And that's where we jump to. That's where we jump to. Many partners do that. And then many, some have been able to make that transition, great. Others have realized, wow, that's really hard. That's really, really hard. It's interesting because there are other things that might also be hugely impactful in the business. Would you agree that implementing for the very first time for an enterprise a robust CRM solution would be revolutionary for a business? Oh yeah, unlocks amazing power for a company to do that. Easy to do? Oh no, definitely not, right? Definitely not. If you're a decent sized enterprise and you're gonna look at deploying Salesforce for the first time, this is a multi-year engagement, right? It is very difficult to get to that, but it is revolutionary. I would also argue that if you're an enterprise that's looking at outsourcing 100% of your contact center staff to a BPO, we're no longer gonna do it in-house, we're gonna turn the whole thing over to a full service BPO, right? I would argue that's also revolutionary. That's a massive change for a business. Can also have a big impact on a business, but it's complexity, right? It's very, very complex. Doesn't mean we don't do those things, but I wanna challenge your thinking about something. What do you think is the most attractive quadrant on this chart? What do you think? Low effort, high impact, right? Low effort, high impact. What can I be doing today that doesn't require massive effort, that doesn't take me 12 months to deploy, that doesn't take me, massive cycles around engineering and customization and millions in professional services and all the stuff to ultimately get you there? What are the things that you can do today that can still have high impact on the business? And I argue that the suppliers that you see in this room, they fit here. They fit here. And by the way, they're not in any specific order because it's a small box. So I just wanted to put them all up there because they all fit there, right? Branded caller ID is as simple as it comes. Incredibly low effort, but massive impact. If I can spike my first call answer rate by 40, 50, 60%, that's a huge impact on my business, right? When I look at things like fractional BPO, if I look at a gig worker scenario where I can now fill gaps in my staffing using a fractionalized labor model, that is a straightforward proposition that doesn't require for me to replace all of my people, right? But I can solve a really important business problem easily. When I get into natural language IVR stuff, there are scenarios right now we're working with clients where they're not ready to replace their contact center platform. That's way down the road. And right now they have a simple IVR, press 1 for this and 2 for that. And it's a bit of a mess right now. The very first step for this client is to front end it with a natural language IVR that is actually able to have that two-way conversation, not at first to solve all these problems automatically, but simply to intelligently route those calls in a more efficient, more effective way. And at the same time, capturing a bunch of data that I can then later customize around automation and containment. It's an easy jumping off point. QA, QM for customers that are still doing legacy ways of how they're measuring quality, right? Where they're doing manual assessments of their agents in a randomized fashion. They get 1 or 2 of these a month per agent. Guys, that is so old school, and automated AI-driven QA, QM solutions are a slam dunk and an easy jumping off point regardless of your infrastructure. Guys, all of these are examples of places that we can start in engaging clients. What happens is interesting, is if I get really good at this, guess what happens, guys? I'm positioning things that can give us quick wins, that can give us quick, fast ROIs, right? Quick, short time to value for the customer. And most importantly is it builds momentum. And before you know it, that revolutionary change is now being achieved because I started it in these logical steps. Is that making sense? And so we got to think about that. We got to think about where do we start this process, this engagement, this journey that we're on with a client around, to transformation. Such a big word. How do I get from here to transformation? Well, you get there one step at a time. And the solutions you're going to hear about this week are all about that. How do we help that customer take that very first step towards transformation? And as you put one step after the other, before you know it, you've achieved it. There's something interesting about this, kind of how we categorize this. We'll talk about this more in a second. You'll notice that one side feels very transactional. Am I right? Very transactional. And the other side does not. And it requires us as sellers and as advisors to get out of the way of thinking about being just transactional salespeople. So leading change is not an easy thing. It's not. It's not for the faint of heart. Every one of us have to be really good at leading change. Enterprise leaders have to be really good at leading change. If you're not good at leading change, you're probably not going to succeed in this business. It's one of the more difficult things to do. It also requires humility. It requires humility because you have to recognize where you're at. It starts with an honest evaluation, an appraisal of our own situation. So let's look at that from a partner perspective for a second. What is an honest appraisal of the partner channel in general, right, that we're faced with? Here's some interesting things about CCaaS. And again, this is where we kind of started our thinking around around CX. You said CX, oh, I must be thinking I'm replacing a contact center. But here's some interesting thing. Adoption around CCaaS is absolutely increasing, has been for a number of years now. But check this out, CIO.com said in February, it's expected that 60% of enterprises will be using CCaaS by 2025. So in just over a year, 60% of enterprises will have their contact center in the cloud. That's a big number. That's a huge number compared to what it was just a few years ago. But what happens when a technology gets north of 50, 60% adoption? The growth curve starts to flatten. It starts to flatten. Could it be that we're going to be entering a phase in the next year or two where cloud contact center growth, the huge kind of transformative growth of cloud contact center is going to start to flatten? In fact, ICMI said in February that 2023 will mark the first year that contact center agent populations will decline globally. Decline. That's nuts. So we're actually seeing this agent population globally amongst all enterprises and BPOs all combined. Those numbers are going to actually start to decline for the very first time this year. Art Weston is an AI futurist. I know that because when I met him, he said, "Hi, I'm Art Weston. I'm an AI futurist." Really sharp guy. The brain on this guy is massive. And Bob and I spent an hour with this guy, and we were pretty floored. But he said something pretty provocative. He did. He said that within 5 years, 95% of contact center seats are going to go away. Within 5 years, 95% of contact center seats are going to go away. Now, raise your hand if you think that's just hyperbole. There's some hands, definitely, right? By the way, I'd put my hand up as well. I think it is, it's definitely hyperbole. But what's the number? It's not zero. We're already seeing that it's less than zero. It's going to be going down. So what is the number? Is it 20% of contact center seats? Is it 40? Is it 50? Could you imagine in 5 years, half of contact center seats going away? Does that feel more like plausible in your mind? That's a big, big number. It also spells incredible opportunity for all of us. Because where are those seats going? Where are those seats going? UCaaS and CCaaS, the ARPU, average revenue per user, around UCaaS and CCaaS has dropped radically just in the past decade with us. For those that were in the early days of hosted voice over IP, We remember selling hosted voice over IP at like $50 a seat. Remember those good old days? That was awesome. You know, that 100-seat deal, we're like, yes, that's big. Now to make any money on UCaaS, I got to find that 10,000-seat deployment, right? I mean, your ARPU has gone from 50 to less than $12 a seat now. The big drivers around Microsoft Teams and Zoom that have completely disrupted the economic model around hosted voice, right? Completely. What about CCaaS? CCaaS has dropped from 125 to about $85 in kind of street price. You guys agree with that? About $85, really common number. It might be a little bit higher in some cases, could be a little bit lower. Guys, Zoom rolled out their new contact center platform. Their list price is $65. We know Zoom, we know them well. By the way, they're going to be here this week at one of our dinners. You'll get to hear from them briefly. But guys, we know the street price for contact center is going down to sub 50. Sub 50. The commoditization of UCaaS and CCaaS is a harbinger that's really important for us to keep an eye on. It really is. It puts the onus on us to do something radically different. Because as a partner, how do you outsell the pace of margin compression? If you're wanting to grow revenues, your goal is to grow revenues, right? And you've been doing that for a long, long time. You've been successful at doing that. But then you add things like price compression, and you add things like customer churn, which becomes a real thing the bigger you get. The bigger I get, the harder it is to grow revenues. Because what it actually does is it starts to flatten my growth. Things like price compression and things like churn start to flatten my growth, right? So if that's the reality, by the way, is that true? A lot of big partners here have been around this for a long time. Do you agree with that premise? That it becomes more and more difficult, increasingly difficult to grow because of those two factors? You have to figure out how do I outsell price compression? How do I outsell churn if I still want to see aggressive growth? I would argue the way to do that is you have to open up new sources of revenue. That's where CX comes in for me. That's what we've been talking about for the past several years, right? Is CX opens up a brand new source of revenue that is outside and an additive to what we've always been traditionally focused on. The deal size on CX is easily 4 to 5 times larger than what we've traditionally been used to in the world of telecom. 4 to 5 times larger. And if I can get really good at that, that's the only way that I can continue to see accelerated growth for my business. It's a big dilemma. So what's the impact of generative AI? You're going to hear a lot of talk about Gen AI this week. It's a big deal. What's the impact for the channel when it comes to generative AI? Long term, I would absolutely say, guys, it is transformative. It will change everything that we do. There are people that are saying that every business on the planet will be impacted by this. Every industry will be impacted by this. Ours is no different. We will absolutely be impacted by this. Long term, it's transformative, but short term, it's actually introduced a little bit of a wait and see posture with a lot of customers. Do you agree with that? You know, this idea of this challenge around indecision, very real thing. Some that are stepping back and waiting, I want to see how this develops. It's moving so quick. I'm worried about jumping on until I get some more clarity around things, right? Excuse me. So that short-term wait-and-see posture and indecision is a reality. But there's some good news around this. We're seeing tons of signs of this starting to thaw. Big deals that we've been working on for a very long time that got pushed a lot, got delayed. You know, stakeholders coming in, more assessment happening. I want to look at this or I want to test that, and things delaying. We're now starting to see that thaw. Peter, where you at? Do you agree with that? This guy just closed a $70,000 monthly deal around AI automation. What's that? Just a year one, good. We're seeing these big deals. By the way, dude, you get no reaction for that? Hell yeah, man, 70 grand a month. We all want more of those, right? The thaw is beginning to happen. It really is. And it's really driven by use cases. What are those early jumping off points? Again, it's back to that idea of those small steps, right? I mean, this particular customer started with an AI chat use case around scheduling. Really important, hugely impactful for the business. But there's dozens of other things that that you guys can be doing there, am I right? Dozens of other things. And guess what's happening? Those things are now starting to click off. That's how this happens. It doesn't say, hey, let's do all of this all at once, right? It doesn't. We start with an easy step. There's another thing that's changing about our channel, and that's this competitive landscape. Look at these names up here for just a second. You guys recognize a lot of these? Yeah, a lot of them, right? Big names on here, guys, that have been selling to the large enterprise for a long time. Let me give you some examples. Clients of Capgemini, Banner Health, Hellman Worldwide, Atos Medical, they're selling suppliers into those customers like AWS and Nuance, Oracle, Salesforce, ServiceNow. Cognizant, big healthcare play. They're selling things like Automation Anywhere, RPA solutions, AWS, Genesys, Core, NICE, Salesforce, ServiceNow, UiPath. Who here competes with Cognizant? Raise your hand. You compete with Cognizant. Solemn Consulting, Healthcare, Carhartt, thank you. Wow, that's good, I didn't even know that. Chicago Cubs, Fairstone Bank, they're selling Five9, Salesforce, UiPath, AWS. Do you compete with Solemn Consulting? Yes, you do. Your world is changing. As you get into a whole new category of services and solutions for your clients, be ready. You're not just competing with other agent peers. You're now competing with big players in the consulting and professional services and SI space that want that business from that same exact customer. That requires us to do different things, doesn't it? It requires us to get really smart about how we articulate our value. So the big question is, do we act now and see what develops? Do we? Rapid acceleration around the pace of innovation, I would argue, demands action. It demands action. And the early mover advantage is going to be key. My good friend Matt Coughlin, to steal your line, says you're early all the way up until you're late. Is that true? Some have argued that that I have a bit of a tendency over my career to be early on things. I would admit that. That's part of the fun I have. I try to get out in front of things and try to predict where things are going, and I want to be the first to plant the flag, right? I want to get out there and push the envelope. And yes, there are times where I've been maybe too early, for sure, okay? But I believe you, Matt, that you're only early until the very moment that you're late. Where are you right now in that cycle? Where are you right now in that cycle? You guys saw this quote a year ago. Datatrek says, we expect continued growth in automating roles, both to take the place of workers companies cannot find and to offset rising wage pressures. This will be an important trend to watch as it will shape labor markets over the long term, given that automation, once installed, is simply never reversed. That argues that we've got a window, that your customers are going to make this pivot. They're going to start to implement, they already are, they're going to start to implement all this automation. And as they do, as they automate more and more and more of their enterprise, they're never going back. So you either grab your unfair share of that huge shift or you miss out. And unfortunately, there are, I was going to say hundreds, I think it's fair to say thousands of partners in our ecosystem that will be playing catch up 2 years from now saying, oh shit, what happened? Where did my customers go, right? Why wasn't I ready for this? Why wasn't I ready for this? I argued in 2012 that anything as a service would represent the largest transfer of wealth in the channel in our lifetime up to that point. Who would agree that since 2012, your business has grown radically because of things like cloud? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's true for all of us. That's true for all of us. Well, you heard me say this 3 years ago. What I call the monetization of labor, the shifting of the labor dollar that we've always used to spend, now shifting to technology services, right? to automation and other things around technology, that the monetization of labor will spur even a bigger transfer of wealth in the channel in the next 3 years. And we are seeing that. We are seeing that happen right here and right now. That shift is significant, guys. $159 billion is what Canalys predicts will generative AI will generate for the channel by 2028. $159 billion. And that labor dollar is shifting to these technology services, and the partner that is best positioned to take advantage of that is the trusted advisor, you guys. You're in an amazing position to help those customers make that pivot from pure labor spend into technology spend. Guys, Wells Fargo says that robots will eliminate 200,000 jobs in the banking industry within the next 10 years. Think of the dollars that are freed up when I shift from paying salaries to now paying in technology. And with rare exceptions, Omni being one of them, it's hard for me to make money on all the labor spend. If I can figure out how to position fractionalized staffing and BPO services into that world, I can make a ton of money there. You're going to learn more about that this week. But the majority of that labor that is shifting to technology, when that shift starts to happen, now you start thinking about recurring revenue. Who's your daddy, right? That's what we want. That's what our businesses are built on. So the implications for the business leaders. Leaders must somehow alleviate the fear that's out there, the anxiety around the loss of jobs to technology. This isn't the first time in our history that we've had to do that, right? And there are paths forward for that. Leaders they have to be skilled in leading transformation. The new CTO is actually the Chief Transformation Officer. It's a massive, massive priority for businesses. And leaders have to cultivate a kind of double vision. This idea of how do I see both the aspirational goal and the practical path to get there at the same time. A vision of what the end game could be, but the step-by-step path that I need to follow, that I need to help my partners or my customers follow in order to get to that aspirational goal. And leaders are not all alike. There are, I would argue, few leaders that are actually really good at this. But I would tell you that if you're working with leaders and your customers who are not willing to talk about change, then you're positioned with the wrong people. You're positioned with the wrong people. Stop spinning your wheels. The implications for you got to help your clients face the reality of change and at the same time help them manage that change. You've got to challenge your clients. We talk a lot about that. You'll hear a lot about that this week. You got to challenge your clients and at the same time make it easier for them. That's not easy, is it? You've got to paint a picture of this new situation, this alternative future of where you can get to together, and also provide a roadmap on how to get there. Incredibly important. You really have to redefine what it means to be a trusted advisor. I would argue, in fact, that the evolution of the trusted advisor is a very needed thing. Evolving away from order taker, traffic cop, broker, into something more like challenger, navigator, builder. The trusted advisors of tomorrow that will win in this channel and in the economy in general are going to be more defined by those three words. You can't just be an order taker. You can't just be a traffic cop, information in, information out. Ask me a question, I get the answer, I provide you the answer, right? That's just a traffic cop. You got to provide more value than that, guys. You know what's a really good traffic cop? Google. Google's a pretty damn good traffic cop. ChatGPT, that's a pretty damn good traffic cop. If your value is being a traffic cop, your value is diminishing. You have to figure out how to challenge customers, how to challenge their thinking, how to help them navigate change, how to help them build a strategy and a roadmap on how to get there. But we must have something meaningful to say about change. Our value is not based in being good order fillers, guys. Our value lies in us having a point of view about change. It's in communicating, in challenging the status quo and helping clients overcome indecision. If you can get really good at that, wow, you can blow this thing out of the water. You really can. But that's the imperative. That's why this ecosystem that we're building is so intimate, so tight, so small. 10,000, 12,000 unique partners in this channel. We've got 60 by design. We want the best of the best to be in this community because we believe only the elite are able to make this kind of pivot. So who can lead change? You can. You can. You can lead change. All right? That's what this week is about. So get ready. Sound good? Thank you.